Welcome to the Vocation to Business Leader podcast. I'm Greg Balster. Here we explore how Catholic leaders let Christ and the teachings of the church he founded guide their work, integrating faith and business. Each episode offers inspiring stories to help you live an undivided life. Let's meet our guest, Marcellino D'Ambrosio, co-founder and creative director of Sherwood Fellows. I probably messed that up. Hey, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Marcellino D'Ambrosio. So
That
yeah,
works.
that's many of you may have run into my dad at some point if you're in this kind of audio Catholic space. My dad is a Catholic theologian, goes by the moniker of Dr. Italy, and I am the younger, less grade son. So yeah.
So how many have there been? I mean, I'm sure you're not junior.
I am the fifth, and my son is the sixth, Marcellino
There you
D'Ambrosio.
go.
So we're keeping that family legacy strong.
Keeping it going.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm the founder of Sherwood Fellows, co-founder, which is a marketing agency that's dedicated to a new Christendom. So we believe that the church was the builder of Western civilization, and in this time of tremendous change and upheaval, that the church needs to take a greater role in the rebuilding and refounding of Western civilization. And so we want to support business leaders, nonprofits, and just everything going on in the Catholic space that's innovative and helping to make that happen. So that's who we are. That's what we do. And we've been at it for about 10 years now. Now, funnily enough, this all started with beginning to market my dad's apostolate. So that's yeah, that's a little bit of the high level.
Yeah. So what was your childlike like and your early faith? Your dad being so prominent in the Catholic, you know, sphere, you would think that you might fall into like have you heard of the preacher kid?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I did fall
Yeah.
into that.
So tell us about that.
Yeah. So I think like there's a little bit more shade that I would put on that story that basically starts with my dad and my mom meeting together in the Catholic Charismatic Renewal that took place in the 1970s. And they were part of one of the Catholic charismatic intentional communities that was built in Baltimore, Maryland. My dad taught there at the Lamb of God Community School, and that was just a huge part of the first 6 years of my life. I mean, was always around other people. We had a really strong support system and network, and just kind of like ethnic Catholic experience as well. That when my dad got a job teaching at the University of Dallas and we moved down here, that didn't get replaced. And so I don't think that my dad had as much of a understanding of what it would be like, um, you know, growing up in a like largely Protestant, very different culturally, yeah, just a really different cultural experience in Flower Mound, this like wealthy suburb of Dallas. And so we homeschooled for a little while, and then we went into a really small or private school, Montessori school, and then my brother and I. And the rest of my siblings, when my dad had some financial challenges, we went into public school my seventh grade year. And it really was just this like when I go back and look at that whole process, I just have this deep sense that Catholicism just doesn't really work very well when it's not done in community. And I think that when we say community, we just don't even really have a great idea of what that is because we've been so deracinated and we're just so used to this sort of like, yeah, you just like pick up and go to a new city and that's just where the jobs are and that's it. Like everybody's sort of their own little atom floating in space and your relationship with God is this like one-to-one thing and you might have a little bit of a communal experience of it at your parish but not you're not really like in community unless your neighbor can tell you all of your baggage. So I think like that lack of community and lack of sense of identity that I felt um, really turned into a just a desperate need for other people's affirmation, other people's I don't know, their approval, friend groups that I could fit into. So when I went into middle school at seventh grade, I really began to go down a pretty dark path just because the people that I was around and who was available, I kind of fell in with the punk rock skateboarding crowd. And not that they were really bad people, but just that I think that the public school system itself, the way that it operates, is just kind of like, hey, here's a petri dish full of random kids, like it's basically like totally unsupervised, allowing the groups and the tribes to just kind of run amok and do whatever they want. And that, I mean, not really, like there's some boundaries around physical safety, right? But like as far as like values being present and correction, that's like in helping these groups of people get along or figure out their stuff, like that's not present, right? So I just, like I learned very early in that process that what mattered was like girls' affection and attention, and that if I didn't get that, then like I was going to be sitting alone at my tables forever. And so I made my one goal, like whatever it's going to take to get girls to like me, that's the thing that I'm going to do. I wasn't going to be able to do that through football. So I started playing rock music and like just kind of took the guitar route and
Mm-hmm.
like a good Italian. And yeah, I by the end of senior year, things were pretty bad. I was getting kicked out of the house a lot. I was getting brought back by the cops, which is kind of miraculous that I never got arrested or sent to juvie. I think they just didn't want to do the paperwork, honestly. But I just, it wasn't so much like drugs and alcohol that was my problem, but just this kind of deep seated resentment at society that was coming out in all these very destructive ways. And and also like dating multiple girls at a time is always a recipe for lots of trauma.
You
Um,
think?
so all throughout this experience, I never stopped going to youth group. Like we have one of the best kind of um, Catholic megachurch youth group parishes in Dallas, St. Anne's and Capel, my home parish still. And I had a number of powerful experiences with God on retreats and at Steubenville conferences. But really, like there was just this tug of war going on between my youth group, who are maybe like once a week, for a couple hours, people in my life, versus my band, the next door neighbors, the like just the community that I was living directly inside of was not living there. There was no faith really. And so this tug of war between these two different tribes that I was sort of saying I belonged to, even though their values were in direct opposition to each other, that eventually just got untenable. And God was like, I'm going to rescue this kid. And so one day after a particularly awesome show, my mom came into, well, my brother and I came back home from a late night set. We've been scouted by a number of different record labels, and we were just really excited, kind of top of our game. And my mom was still awake at like 2 a.m., which is never a good sign, right? That's bad. That's really bad. So, yeah. So we walk in, and my mom, she's waiting for us, and she says, hey guys, you're going down a really dark path, and you're not going to be able to come back from this eventually. One day you're going to look up and you're going to say, how did I get here?
Mm.
And I want you to really think about where you are going right now. My brother and I at the time were considering not going to college and just trying to go on tour, and we're going to the local community college and just using that as a excuse to like continue the direction we were going down. And so we just, for whatever reason, I think the Holy Spirit really used that to convict us. And my brother and I prayed about it, which we didn't do really ever together. And we felt like, good enough to go to sleep. Like, hey, God, if you want our band, if you want our life, you can have it. But the next day, our band broke up and both of our girlfriends broke up with us. Like, not kidding.
Careful what you ask for.
I know. Yeah. It's, it was a complete rug pull, like God just took the whole thing, 6 months later, despite lots and lots of just I don't know, like that war continuing. I felt like my brother and I sort of got coughed up by the whale at on the stairs of St. John Vianney Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota, like going from basically like lives of debauchery to we're in seminary now. Pretty
Bo-
good.
Both of you
Both of
went to
us at the same time. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not going to go into all of the details of why that happened, but let's just call it Catholic rehab for a minute. And that, like, that kind of, I mean, it was tremendously painful. Like, we were not ready for the amount of structure and the, just the formation that was going to, that we were submitting to. But I think that in many ways it was exactly what I needed. And uh, yeah, so after that, I left. My brother kept going, and we both went into ministry after. We did youth ministry for several years. We were working with youth in, just out of the same heart of like, this is where we were. And we're very successful at that. We built two of the biggest youth groups and most, like, just the strongest youth communities in Dallas. But there was no real like forward momentum to a career path like that. It's like, hey, you can be a youth minister and make $35,000 forever,
Right. Right.
So we knew that we had to get out and we had to find something else. We started moonlighting for an agency, marketing agency in Dallas, and um, that agency didn't want to take on Catholic work. So when my dad and a number of other people came to us asking for help, we had to take it on apart from that agency. And one thing led to another. There weren't a lot of people in the space at that time. It was kind of 2015. So Sherwood Fellows was born, and shortly after that, we went full time. So that's the deeper story of our transformation from hooligans, kind of pastors' kids, to um, yeah, to the I don't know, just culture warriors that we are now, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So, did you go to Ave Maria University?
I did. Yeah,
So, was that before or after the seminary?
that was after. Yeah,
Okay.
I stayed at seminary for a year and then went to Ave.
Okay.
I pretty quickly realized that I was not called to priesthood and I wanted to get married.
Yeah. So, Anthony being your twin, I read that he got really sick.
Yes.
So, what was your experience watching your twin go through all that?
Yeah. So there were two times that this went down. The first was after seminary. He had a profound anxiety disorder that he could not figure out how to get rid of or what it was. And then he kind of got it under control for a little while. So I think our business was it was just an amazing thing for both of us in many ways. But um, at the end of 2019, his insomnia and his anxiety started to become so crushing that he couldn't show up to meetings. He was just a mess. This was like just at the end of 2019. I got married. I had a baby, and then COVID happened. And not only did COVID happen, I mean, that was traumatic for everybody, but our business was built to support like multi-year transformations of large Catholic organizations, many of which were like in-person focused, right? And so we were devastated by COVID, just absolutely wrecked. We went from a million in revenue to 300,000 in revenue projected. It was just, I think, like that set both of us off, and it was like kind of we're both struggling with health, but Anthony particularly. And then when that happened, it just was kind of a last straw that led to a deeper collapse. And so it was tremendously painful and challenging for me. And it turns out that it was a mold overgrowth that my brother was struggling with, which is very hard to diagnose and almost impossible to get rid of. So doctors weren't being able to tell him anything about what was going on. We all thought that it was just purely mental, but Turns out it was not mental, it was a physical element that needed a physical solution. But we were, taking him to priests and, psychologists, and none of that was working. So he finally, after, basically like a year and a half of almost not sleeping at all and not being able to eat because eating caused it to get worse, and he finally found the root cause and started to make lifestyle changes that led to improvement. But we had to put our business on pause during that time because his life was just not in a place where he could carry the load. And I definitely couldn't carry it by myself, given what we were facing. So we had to let go of the team. We had to close our doors for about a year and a half, as I said. And I took a job at Cent Ventures, which was a client and close friend of mine, John Cannon, which if you haven't had him on the podcast, you should. And we worked together building Cent Ventures, the community for Catholic entrepreneurs, for that time until he was in a better place. You know, I'm in a better place, and then we came back to Sherwood a year and a half ago. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So was it mold in his environment or in his house, or where was the mold from?
So it's a mold that we all have on our skin and in our body, but I think as you've probably seen this, but there's a tremendous outbreak of autoimmune disorders and all sorts of health problems in my generation and lower. And so I don't know exactly what's causing it, but it seems to be that their our immune systems are not functioning the way that they're supposed to be functioning. And so like that should be an easy thing for the body to fight off, but it wasn't, and it grew out of control to the point that it was basically killing him.
So Sherwood Fellows, how did you come up with the name, with that name?
Yeah, it's a great question. We My brother and I were always, we were hooligans, we were punk rock skateboarders, and um I don't think that all of that was necessarily cursed. Like, I think that there's a good portion of it that God actually wanted to use for his goodness. And so when we looked back at our, like, naming anything it's a weird it's a weird process.
Hmm.
And there's lots of different theories about whether you should be really specific, like the Catholic marketing agency, or more clever or whatever. But one thing that is actually very true is that distinctive, unique, uncommon names are very good for branding purposes. So we knew that, and we were looking at, like, how do you one of yeah we just looked at like stories that we loved from our history, and Robin Hood was one of our favorites when we were growing up. I think that has been prophetic in many ways for us, so we decided to go with the Robin Hood themed name, and Sherwood Fellows, the Sherwood Forest people, that's what it is. So I think that it goes very well with the theory and the approach that we take, which is it's not always going to be pretty. It's not always going to look like all buttoned up, but we're going to get you results in service of the true king. So in the Robin Hood myth, right, he's the company of, or the merry ape men. They are stealing money from the bad people that have all of the money, and then they're giving it to the good people. And that's not necessarily like a anti-capitalism thing. It's more of a, like, taking from the evil and giving it to the good. And so we thought, man, there's so much wrong in our culture and our world. There's so many bad actors. Business has become rampant with just purely value stealing operations, and we want to be a force for good that takes market share from those people and gives it to people who have a better heart and a better and more care for their people and their constituents. So that's the theory.
Okay. So yeah, there's a lot of marketing agencies out there. So what makes you guys different?
Yeah, well, one thing is that we're working with people who are innovators more than we are working with. Yeah, institutions, big institutions can be innovators. So I don't want to say it like we can't work with big organizations. We've worked with many of the biggest names in the Catholic world. However, what we do that's uncommon, that I don't think really any of the other marketing agencies in the church do, is that we are particularly capable at getting new things off the ground, helping to strategize, develop products, develop initiatives, run campaigns that would seemed impossible. We are really dedicated to impact more than we are to simply like moving numbers across a ledger. And so oftentimes like if there's a project that's just really straightforward and the main thing that the client needs is like just, hey, run some digital marketing for us. There are plenty of other agencies that do that. We're friends with them and we'll refer them there. So Fusati is a great one in that kind of situation. But if you're looking to like really do something different, you're going to carve out a new product, a new initiative that's just, and it seems like you've got the deck stacked against you, like we're your guys for that. So, I mean, there's a lot more theory and how we practically go about that I could share with you if you'd like, but I'll leave it there for now. And if you want, you can take it in.
Yeah. So I saw on LinkedIn, and I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but it said, I tell every single client the secret to being loved, be weird.
Yeah.
So how do you find the right weird?
Yeah, great question. I don't think that that's that hard to find. I think that that's a perspective that you need to have, which is that the only reason for you to do anything is because you have a new take on it. If you are just going to go and make Coca-Cola and the only thing that's going to be different about it is that you own it, you are going to fail
Yeah.
100%,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, so yeah, I think another way of saying the same thing is that you can grow business by one of two ways. One, you can work your absolute ever loving ass off, which doesn't guarantee you success, but is you can do that. You can be completely undifferentiated and just work so hard. You're going to have bad margins. Your people are going to hate it, but you can basically like force build a business that way. Or you can find an innovative area that your competitors or the world at large is not serving, and you can do that thing. The problem is that's risky. That's really risky. It's a lot more challenging to do what hasn't been done before. There are going to be a lot more people that say you can't do this. There's reasons that no one has done this yet. And I don't, so that's as true of a business or really any organization or initiative is like, you've got to do something that's different or else why do it? But even beyond that, the way that you message about it also should be different. The way that you show up as a brand. So I think what most people do when they're building a marketing operation is they look at their industry and they look at all these big names and big people and they copy them. They're like, let's do, I don't know, New Catholic Podcasts. Let's let's get Father Mike Schmitz on there. We'll make it blue and gold and we'll like put a cross on it. That's how most people would approach like starting a Catholic podcast, right? It's like, well, that's actually most Catholic podcasts right there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so what you should do instead is something completely different. Like use a totally different color palette. Put your competitors all up in front of you on a pull them up, pull their websites up, look at them and pick typography that looks nothing like that. Say things that look nothing like that. Like that's what I mean by be weird. If you're not weird, you are not going to be noticed. No one is going to care. And you're going to have to pay extra, like you're going to have to pay a lot for your audience. You're going to have to work extra hard for your audience. You can do it, but it's going to suck. So that's my, yeah, be loved,
Yeah.
be weird.
Yeah. So, what are some common mindset blocks that organizations experience in their marketing strategies?
Yeah,
And
I
how
think
do you
that,
help overcome that?
well, that one is the biggest. That's the one that I come up against with literally everyone. They all want to be less weird, less unique, and safe, more safe. And that just means no one cares about you, no one notices you. And there's a very good reason for this, which is that human behavior is tribal. So let's just kind of do a thought experiment here. Go back to my high school environment. And this, I don't think this is true of high school anymore, but some version of this is probably true. There is a group of kids that are like the skater kids. There's a group of kids that are the band kids. There's a group of kids that are the jocks or whatever. And if I want to, and each of them have very different differentiated looks. They have a different language. They have a different kind of like how they approach their, I don't know, just everything. Everything's different about
Yeah.
them. I am built to, if I don't have a tribe, or if I need to engage a different tribe, I will look for one that looks like a tribe. I will look for one that has a distinctive vibe, feel, and approach. And I will pick whichever one I feel like I probably fit in with the best or might fit in with the best. And I'll go in that direction. They'll give me some they might do a little bit of testing to see if I'm a good fit for them. In a natural setting, that's actually a good thing. And once they've kind of said, all right, this guy's got it. So for me, it was like I went and I tried to ollie a 10 stair or jump a 10 stair on a skateboard, right? Like within a week of skating, which is crazy and a good way to break your leg. But they were like, dude, that guy's got it. So it's like this idea that actually there being a gap between you and your audience is a good thing. Like you are, especially if you're building something that has a long-term commitment to it, you actually want there to be some gap that needs to get jumped over or filled. So being weird gets you into this tribe mindset. Like people, you're tapping into this evolutionary biology where people say that's different. I want to belong to that. Like I'm not quite a part of it, but it looks cool, and I think I probably want to be. You know, and so um, I think there's a good relationship between scalability and weirdness that we could get into a lot of dialogue and weeds about how that works. I think that there is definitely a way in which you can be too off putting. But yeah, so I think that most of the time brands take the opposite approach and they try to be as approachable and normal as possible. Totally the wrong thing to do, not how our evolutionary biology has set us up to behave. We don't want to be like everyone else. We don't want to own the same things as everyone else. We want to be like and own the things for the people that we want to be like. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess more than anything else, that's the biggest thing to break down. And I think the second thing that's hard in the marketing environment is that in the West, we have become so obsessed with logic that we've really lost our ability to communicate on an emotional or artistic level. And the truth is, this has been studied in many, many ways. No one really makes decisions based on logic. They use logic to rationalize what their gut says.
Mhm.
So you have to speak to emotion, and that means conflict. That means uniqueness. That means art. That means cleverness. It's not, I mean, yes, clarity also is very important too. I definitely don't want to downplay clarity. However, you don't get people's attention by just saying, hey, I have the thing that you want, buy mine. You get it by telling a story that brings them into it. And so most people, what they do when they go to market is they say, hey, I have a shovel and you need a shovel, buy my shovel. And that's it. That's all they do. Great marketers do is they say something like, you don't just want any shovel. You want the most durable, kick-ass shovel that you've ever worked with because you are a durable, kick-ass man. That's who you are,
Right.
And they tell that story. So it's a really different way of looking at it, but I think that it's hard for us as Americans to understand that process. And so we just end up talking about the what all the time, and people just don't care. And we're like, why isn't my marketing working? You know what I mean? So That's it.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously, marketing and sales are not the same thing. How would you define the difference?
Yeah, marketing is sales at scale. You want me to keep going?
Sure. Yeah.
I think that like you do this naturally in sales, what I just said. Like you, a salesperson, a good salesperson will build a relationship with someone. They'll give them value. They will tailor their message to the person once they really know them and understand what they need. And so they provide this deep sense of connection that if they're good, if the organization is good, if the salesperson is good, that has this human feel. And so when someone buys from a good salesperson, they're not really just buying the product; they're buying the experience that
Oh
the
yeah.
salesperson is giving them. And the difference with marketing is that when you are directly in front of a person and you have, like many hours of time that you're spending with them, or you're engaged in this very human relationship, you can tailor every pitch deck to some extent to that audience. You can really tailor it like as much as you need to. But in marketing, you don't have that ability unless you're a massive, massive brand. So in marketing, you have to pick a single audience and you're going to get max like 2 seconds with that
Mm-hmm.
audience to
Mm-hmm.
get their attention. You have to build a relationship with them. You have to give them an experience of some sort, like make them feel something. You have to educate them without ever having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is that like you've got to be extremely focused, and you have to understand that you have almost no time and craft every message for the maximum impact and simplicity in order to get them moving through this process of kind of what we would call their consideration. So in the marketing world, one way that we would talk about this is that there's there have been studies that have been done that show that 90% of your possible audience is not in market. They're not looking for your thing right now. So that's where the whole like building a relationship thing comes in. That's where a lot of this like emotion and storytelling happens. Once they are in market, then you can give them messages that are much more like, buy now, here's a deal, here's a package that we think works for you. you I mean, people use the term marketing funnel a lot. I don't know how valuable that actually is, because people are either in market or they're not in market. You don't need to buy a toothbrush more than once a year or whatever, so like no amount of marketing is going to get you to go from I'm just going to buy another toothbrush, right? More than I needed to. So I think the funnel metaphor is not actually very accurate, but the point is that like they're going to go through this process, and you want to be the one that is ready to say, "Hey, you've already seen these posts for a while, and I'm ready to go if you are. You've been following, you know that we are like reputable in this industry,
Mm-hmm.
and you like our vibe. Like, let's do this."
Mm-hmm.
So marketing needs to do that, but at a scale that sales just would never reach. So it's the same process. It's really not that different. It's just taking it to a different, like, it's just a different practice, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So on your website, you said that 79% of business leaders report dissatisfaction with their marketing agencies. So why do you think that is?
Yeah, because most marketing agencies, well, within the category that we're in, I think the problem looks different than what it would look like if I was working with Nike. But within our category, which is like $10 million operations and below, you are generally going to get the same pitch from every marketing agency that you go up to. Um, they're going to want to get you on a retainer for about $3,000 a month. They're going to have a senior person who's going to be on that discovery process with you. They're going to get you set up in some sort of pay per click or um, other like cold email system, and then they're going to take that person off. It's going to be a bunch of Indian dudes, and your results are going to like look good for a few months, and then they're going to crater. That's basically just what everyone is doing. I think it's a two-sided problem. I think marketers are doing that because that's what business owners are signing up for. But I would encourage, if you are a business owner or business leader, you to ask some better questions about what is actually reasonable within your resources. It's like marketing is not magic. I mean, I don't know a single company that just immediately turns on the faucet and you just start getting crazy results right off the bat. Like, that's not how marketing works. And so if that agency is not going to like ask you hard questions about your product or your audience or your competitive set, like, hey, is this really different? Is this really the right pricing? Is this really the right go to market approach that you're taking? If they're not asking those kinds of questions, they're not probably going to deliver you great results. If they're not willing to tell you, hey, this is probably going to be 3 months before you start getting results, and we're going to have to keep innovating every so often to get those results, then they're not going to deliver you what you're asking for. So you're just going to get pissed, work with them for 6 months, you're going to waste a lot of money, and then you're going to say marketing never works, I never want to do this again. So I'd say pay up front for good strategy, or do good strategy yourself first, and then look for a way to engage an agency that's going to take you through a process that has an end point, a clear end state. So for instance, even if you're going to be running digital ads, like, do a campaign, don't do a retainer, or do a campaign and ask for the client to, or ask for the agency to teach you the system that they're putting together, and pay more for the system that you can run yourself. So I think ultimately what all of this comes down to is that the market has priced in basically that labor is worthless. AI is going to be able to do it all. Like, Indian people outsourced are going to be able to do it all. And unless there's a thing that we can just like plug into, that takes labor out of the equation, we don't want to pay for it. But I just think that's I don't think that's actually working. It's clearly not
Mhm.
working. Like, maybe we need to actually put labor back into the equation, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Some human creativity, because you can tell these AI generated things, and it's kind of embarrassing for them. So, tell me about the movie Triumph of the Heart. It looks very powerful.
Yeah, this is a outgrowth of one of our client engagements. Back in 2016, we were hired by the Diocese of Dallas to do a film on suffering. And this was going to kick off a major initiative within the Diocese of Dallas around suffering, and especially targeted to like youth and young adults. So we made this film. We had the idea of like, really in prayer as we were talking about it, and praying through that together. Anthony specifically had this just aha moment that was like, what if we made this story about Maximilian Kolbe? Because everyone always talks about him from like, hey, he saved this other man's life and volunteered to starve with these 9 other men, and that's the end of the story. But there's so much more about like, they survived 14 days in the cell together. They wouldn't have been all Catholic. They would have been political prisoners, like communists. There probably would have been gypsies, gay people, like the whole gamut of who all the Nazis hated are probably in that cell. And they're singing hymns, and they were already starving, but they're lasting 14 days. They lasted so long that the Nazis had to literally inject them with poison to kill them. Like, what? That's a miraculous saint story, but we have very little knowledge of what on inside of that cell. And so we made this film, this short film, and I think, I mean, it was a cool, vibey video that helped kick off this campaign, but it really stuck with all of us. Everyone who worked on it was profoundly moved throughout the process. Everyone who watched it was just like wrecked. And so when my brother's disease came about, he was starving, he couldn't sleep, and he felt like Maximilian Kolbe was coming to him in his cell, in this basically like his room that was his prison, where he just like couldn't really leave or function. He felt like Maximilian Kolbe like helped him through that profound dark place. Anthony was wondering, like, should I keep living, or should I just kill myself because this is unbearable? And that is basically what Maximilian Kolbe did with those 9 other men. He said, like, you should keep living even though there is no future, keep living even though there is no hope, and that's the revolution that that heaven is asking for you to take up. But just even talking about it, it's just like, oh my God, that's a lot. But I think that like the church has always had an answer to the problem of suffering that maybe isn't an easy answer, but it's the answer of the cross, and it's to take up your cross and to carry it. And I think that's a message that this world does not, it doesn't have an answer for suffering. Like when when people suffer, they, in my whole generation has all of these like profound health issues. Many young people are struggling with the inertia of the economy and the feeling of like, I'll never make it. And when there's not enough pleasure to go around and therapy isn't solving your problems and it's not making it all go away, I think the only obvious answer is death. So this film is a film that really wrestles with the reality of suffering. It doesn't pull any punches. It really goes into the desperate difficulty of this darkest place on earth and shows that the power of love, um, like one single act of love, can bring the soul to life, is a quote that Maximilian Kolbe said. And that's kind of our banner that we're waving, that love is the answer. So this film is coming out in the fall. If you want to learn more about it, it's called The Triumph of the Heart. You can go to triumphoftheheart.com. And if you are interested in volunteering to help bring it to your city, obviously most distribution companies are not super keen on like, artsy Catholic saint movie that has 10 guys dying together. But, you know, this is something that we think is an incredible story that really all Catholics should. We all love Maximilian Kolbe anyway. Like, this is a story for us and for our culture. And so we believe that we're going to be able to succeed in making this film really have a great box office return. We're going to get our investors' money back, and we're going to keep doing it because this needs to happen. Hollywood sucks. Everybody knows it. We need a revolution in Catholic art.
Yeah. Amen to that. So, how has your Catholic faith helped you in your business?
I think that it's helped me to. I wrote an article about my experience of 2020 that I'd encourage anybody who really wants to like get into the nitty-gritty of that. Like, how do you deal with failure? How do you deal with suffering? One of the highest suicide rates in the world is among CEOs whose businesses are not doing what they aren't growing the way they want them to grow, shall we say. I don't know if that's failure or not, right? But like, I think that business contains a tremendous amount of suffering. And when you take on the responsibility of providing for a team and the ambition of going for something really big, I think it's very easy to also make that your identity, which I have to confess is still very, very hard for me. I'm struggling with that all day, every day. But so when something fails or someone doesn't do what you wanted them to do or they betray you, like the emotion that you feel in that scenario versus when you're just a random employee is radically different, right? It's like exponentially more impactful. And so I think that what I've experienced in my relationship with God is just that I have to give it over to him every single day. I have to turn my business over, not just every day, but every minute of the day. I have to keep saying, it's yours, God. You're the provider. I'm just here to do your will. Because I think otherwise it's crushing. Like, I don't think the stories of the many successful men in history play out a lot of suffering, a lot of personal brokenness, and a lot of terrible endings. And I think that we want something better. We don't want to die with our wife and our kids hating us, right? Like, our faith is the vehicle to balance that. It's the way that we find solace when it's the way that we like can temper our reactions to the people messing up or betraying us. I think that's we have the greatest faith in the world. It's the only one that works,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Mhm.
and that's what it's for. If you're not applying it in the real world, what's the point?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, where can people go to find more out about you, Sherwood Fellows, and the movie? One more time.
Yeah. So if you want to take a look at what we're up to, you can follow me on LinkedIn, Marcellino D'Ambrosio. I know that's hard to spell, but I'm sure you'll be able to figure it out,
Yeah,
or
I'll
Google
have a
will be able to
link.
figure it out for you. And triumphoftheheart.com is the website for the film, and sherwoodfellows.com, that's our agency. So those are the three places. I also write a Substack, which I talk about kind of the everything that I said on this call, that's what I write about. So if you like this, like let's go. Subscribe to my newsletter and let's stay in touch. So
Yeah,
that's
I'll
it.
put links in the show notes to all those. Yeah. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you'd like to talk about?
Greg, thank you for doing this. I think that it's like telling the stories and giving men the opportunity to really chew on their story with God is such a gift. I think that it's very honoring and probably very inspiring for your audience. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. So I guess we'll end it there. Thank you for joining us today on today's episode of Vocation Business Leader Podcast. We hope you found inspiration as we explore the powerful union between faith and business. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more faith-driven leaders. Until next time, may God guide you in your work and help you witness His love in all you do. God bless.